Welcome to the Global War Watch Network. Beneath the tranquil surface of the Taiwan Strait lies a simmering conflict that could ignite the next major global crisis. The silent movements of the US and Chinese navies are more than just a show of force. They're a high stakes chess match with the future of international relations on the line. Discover why this naval race is the most critical geopolitical flashpoint of our time. Hello and welcome. Today, we're really digging into the Taiwan Strait. It's an area that's constantly in the news, and well, for very good reason. It's this intersection of global trade, strategic power, and some really deep historical tensions. To help us navigate this complex situation, we've looked at insights from top research groups like CSIS, the Stimson Center, and the Global Taiwan Institute. Our goal today is to explore the many sides of this, the challenges, and why this region is just so critical for international stability. We'll look at the different views on potential conflict, uncover those subtle gray zone tactics being used, and understand the huge natural and human obstacles to any large scale military action. We'll also highlight Taiwan's own defense and resilience strategies, so you'll get the key facts, a better sense of why this matters to you, and maybe a fresh angle on what's driving the decisions of major powers here. Okay, let's start unpacking this. The Taiwan Strait, it's more than just water, it's like a vital pipeline for the global economy. Why is this specific region so incredibly important, not just for China and Taiwan, but for everyone, for you listening?
Well, the economic scale here is, it's just fascinating, really staggering. Think about this. Just a disruption, maybe a blockade in the strait. That could mean a $2 trillion hit to the global economy.
2 trillion, wow.
Yeah, and in a full-on military conflict, that number could jump to maybe $10 trillion. And then there's Taiwan's role in semiconductors. They make close to 70% of the world's chips and something like 90% of the really advanced ones.
The most critical ones, yeah.
Exactly. So any disruption there,
Yeah.
you immediately see the massive impact on global supply chains. It's almost impossible to overstate. But, beyond the economics, there's actually quite a bit of debate about how likely a full-scale invasion really is.
Right. That divergence is interesting. We hear reports say from U.S. intelligence suggesting Beijing wants its military ready for decisive action, maybe by 2027. But then you have think tanks like the Stimson Center arguing that an actual invasion is far more complicated than many narratives suggest. They call it among the most complex and dangerous military operations in history.
Yeah.
So, what makes an invasion so difficult, even for a major power like China? What are those complications?
So connecting this back, China itself faces some huge internal hurdles, economic, demographic, political challenges. They all complicate any potential military move. Look at their own economy first. In 2022, about $1.3 trillion of Chinese imports and exports went through the Taiwan Strait. If you include Hong Kong, it's nearly $1.4 trillion.
That's immense reliance.
It is. The strait is absolutely vital for supplying China with raw materials, oil, coal, natural gas, metals. And get this, over half the voyages are internal Chinese shipping between their own East Coast ports. So in a conflict, China faces huge economic fallout. Market shocks, sanctions, disrupted trade. Just being forced to reroute ships adds significant costs and delays. It could even make China vulnerable to a sort of distant blockade. And it's not just Western nations. Even developing countries, including many of China's partners, might put collective pressure on Beijing to end the conflict because of the trade disruption. We saw some of that with Russia after 2022.
So the external economic pain for China would be massive, but you mentioned internal factors too. It sounds like this global interconnectedness almost acts as a kind of self-deterrent for Beijing. What are those domestic pressures?
Yeah, that's a really key point. Internally, you see signs that the Chinese public is increasingly uneasy about the disruptions war would bring.
Yeah.
The economic costs seem to be often weighing heavier than the ideological push for reunification.
Mhm.
And then there's the demographic crunch. The legacy of the one-child policy, which ran from 76 to 2015, means a shrinking pool of fighting-age people and a very low birth rate, about 1.18.
A huge societal shift.
Huge. Plus, think about the aftermath of an invasion. Destroying Taiwan's infrastructure, causing civilian casualties. You'd leave China with potentially 24 million, embittered citizens. That really undermines the whole Chinese don't fight Chinese slogan.
Right. So given these immense internal costs, it makes sense they'd look for other ways. What alternative strategies, these non-military tactics, does Beijing use to push its goals without risking that full invasion?
That's exactly where these gray zone tactics come in. China uses them a lot. They're basically operations designed to gain strategic advantages, chip away at Taiwan's sovereignty and security, but stay below the threshold that would trigger a war.
Okay, like what specifically?
Well, in the maritime space, since August 2022, we've seen these large-scale military drills simulating blockades. They deliberately have closure areas overlap inside Taiwan's 12 nautical mile territorial waters.
Sending a clear message.
A very clear message that Beijing sees Taiwan as part of China, not sovereign. The China Coast Guard, the CCG, also makes frequent incursions into the waters around Taiwan's outer islands, like Wiki and Dongyan. There's even talk of undersea gray zone coercion, suspicious Chinese cargo ships maybe dragging anchors to cut undersea communication cables.
Deliberately.
It's suspected. Interestingly, unlike in the South China Sea, they seem to use their maritime militia less against Taiwan. They might prefer using official military and Coast Guard ships to really hammer home that message of this being an internal matter.
So I've got the maritime pressure. But in today's world, there's another front, right? The digital one. How does this gray zone activity look in cyberspace?
Oh, absolutely. The digital front is incredibly active. Chinese cyberattacks against Taiwan's government hit something like 2.4 million attempts per day in 2024.
Per day? That's staggering.
It is. And the biggest jumps were against telecoms, up 650%. Transportation targets up 70%. Defense supply chain targets up 57%. The aim seems pretty clear. Compromise Taiwan's internal systems, maybe neutralize networks before a potential conflict. Beijing has its cyberspace force doing both offense-disrupting targets and defense. And these attacks spike at key moments, like during presidential campaigns. They've targeted critical infrastructure, things like gas stations, and possibly even the semiconductor industry.
Trying to sow chaos.
Exactly. As James Andrew Lewis at CSIS put it, the goal seems to be creating confusion and emphasize the futility of resistance among people in Taiwan.
And it's not just digital or at sea. You mentioned those outlying islands. There's a more physical, sort of infrastructural gray zone tactic, too, especially around places like Kinmen.
That's right. On Kinmen, you see this gradual integration with the mainland. It started back in 2001 with the three small links, direct transport, post-trade. By 2018, something like 70% of Kinmen's water was actually being supplied from the mainland. Yeah. And there have even been talks about China supplying gas and electricity, maybe even building a bridge connecting Kinmen to Xiamen Airport on the mainland.
So these look like local projects, but they're actually strategic tools.
Precisely. They seem like just infrastructure, but they give Beijing ways to subtly shift the norms, change the status quo in its favor, often regardless of what Taipei wants. It's a slow squeeze.
Okay, so we have these persistent gray zone strategies, but let's shift gears. If Beijing did decide to escalate beyond this, what are the actual physical challenges? Crossing the strait, invading the island itself?
Well, first, the Taiwan Strait itself is a major hurdle. You've got Taiwan's mountains creating this sort of wind tunnel effect, so the sea conditions, often foggy, big swells, strong winds, just crossing is risky.
And it's not exactly narrow.
No, it's 80 miles at its narrowest point,
Yeah.
but the island's topography is where it gets really tough for an attacker. The central mountain range covers almost 60% of the island. We're talking over 200 peaks higher than 9,800 feet.
So rugged terrain.
Extremely rugged, and the nearly 24 million people. They're mostly packed into the western plains. This means incredibly dense cities that basically just stop, and then you have rice paddies right next door.
Okay, so what does that mix of mountains, dense cities, and farmland mean for, say, an amphibious landing?
Well, for amphibious operation, experts say the coastline is remarkably unsuited. Ian Easton, a scholar on this, identified only about 14 potential invasion beaches.
Only 14.
That's the assessment. But the bigger issue is what's behind those beaches. You don't get big, open areas to assemble troops and equipment. You get miles of wet rice paddies or tightly packed urban areas. There's a saying among U.S. tank crews, tanks don't go where the cattails grow because they get bogged down in wetlands.
Ah, right.
So this forces an attacking army onto roads. And roads become instant choke points, perfect for roadblocks, ambushes. It kind of reminds you of Operation Market Garden in World War II.
Where the British got stuck on that single road.
Exactly. They failed, partly because they were funneled onto one road through marshy farmland. It's a defender's dream, an attacker's nightmare.
It really underscores how history gives us some powerful lessons here. Even the strongest militaries have struggled with these kinds of geographic challenges.
Absolutely. Take World War II. U.S. planners had this plan, Operation Causeway, to invade Taiwan, then called Formosa, held by Japan. It called for 9 divisions, over 424,000 troops, 4,000 ships, a massive force.
Huge scale.
But President Roosevelt eventually scrapped it. Why? Because the Pacific commanders basically said they doubted whether Formosa was worth the immense effort. And reportedly, the more they studied Formosa, the less they liked it.
Even at the peak of U.S. military power.
Exactly. And China's own history here is mixed. Their attempt to take Kinmen in 1949 was a disaster, over 9,000 soldiers killed or captured. They had a small success in the Paracels in '74. That was tiny, only about 500 troops.
And modern tech arguably makes it even harder now, right? It doesn't just favor the attacker.
No, definitely not. Look at the Falklands War in '82. The UK sent 127 ships to retake islands held by 13,000 Argentinians, and they still took significant losses. More recently, look at Ukraine and the Black Sea. They don't really have a traditional navy, but they've used modern anti-ship missiles and those uncrewed surface vessels, USVs, very effectively against the much larger Russian fleet.
Right, the drone boats.
Yes, and Taiwan has a strong arsenal. They've got missiles like the Sunfeng II with a 250-kilometer range. That puts Chinese ships at risk even when they're still in port on the mainland. They're also developing uncrewed underwater vehicles, UUVs like the Hailong. It shows that things like persistent surveillance and long-range precision strike aren't just for the superpowers anymore. That's a real shift.
So, facing this complex threat matrix, the gray zone, the potential invasion challenges, how is Taiwan itself preparing to deter and defend?
Well, Taiwan's definitely stepping up its capabilities. Their total armed forces number about 2.58 million. That includes reserves. They have 94,000 active duty soldiers. Since 2022, they've increased compulsory military service from 4 months to a year. That's a significant change.
Yeah.
Their Navy has 167 vessels, including frigates, and they're building new domestic light frigates. The Air Force has around 471 aircraft, including over 280 fighter jets like F-16s. And crucially, as we mentioned, they have strong land attack and anti-ship missile batteries. Missiles like the Sunfeng and the Yumveng, which can reportedly reach targets up to 2,000 kilometers away. That provides a serious deterrent punch.
Okay, that's the hardware. But what about the people, the society? That seems increasingly critical in modern defense thinking. How is Taiwan mobilizing its citizens? What makes a nation truly resilient?
That's such an important question. You saw that poll in late 2024. Two-thirds of Taiwanese said they'd be willing to defend the island. That's a strong statement.
Yeah.
And since 2025, the government's been running these whole-of-society civil defense drills. They're preparing people not just for invasion, but also natural disasters. You also have civilian groups like the Kuma Academy offering courses on things like identifying enemy soldiers, evacuation, battlefield first aid. And apparently, the courses fill up incredibly quickly.
Seats sell out in minutes, I read.
Yeah, it shows real public engagement. This all ties into Taiwan's overall defense concept, which Admiral Lee Seaman proposed back in 2017. It basically redefines victory. It's not about defeating China outright, but about failing the enemy's mission to occupy Taiwan. So it emphasizes asymmetric tactics, denial, using that tough geography and civilian infrastructure to stop landings and prepare for insurgency if needed.
A porcupine strategy, essentially.
Kind of, yeah. It involves phases: protecting their own forces, using deception, then hitting landing forces hard with things like sea mines and swarms of those fast, uncrewed attack boats we talked about.
So, military and civil defense are being strengthened. What about the economic side of resilience and that crucial element of international support?
Taiwan's working on that too. Their new southbound policy is all about diversifying trade and investment away from mainland China, reducing that dependence.
Makes sense.
They're also pushing for multilateral trade deals, like joining the CPTPP and trying to secure supply chains, building chip foundries overseas, stockpiling critical minerals with partners. Energy and food security are big priorities too. Plans to boost LNG storage, increase food self-sufficiency. On international support, the U.S. officially maintains strategic ambiguity under the 1979 Taiwan Relations Act. They provide defensive weapons, commit to resisting coercion, but don't explicitly promise to intervene militarily. It keeps everyone guessing to some extent.
Right, that deliberate vagueness. But you do see the U.S., Australia, and Japan working more closely together, forming a kind of united front in the region.
Yes, definitely. They're often called the anchors of regional stability. Japan is significantly boosting its own defense capabilities. Standoff weapons, missile defense, uncrewed systems, and they want interoperability with the U.S., Australia, and, quote, preferably Taiwan.
Interesting phrasing.
It is. Australia is also upping defense spending and exploring cooperation with Taiwan in areas like renewable energy, hydrogen, lithium batteries again, aiming to reduce reliance on China for key supply chains. And space is another critical domain here. China's launching a record number of satellites, many with military uses.
100 launches planned for 2024.
Exactly. So the U.S., Japan, and Australia are collaborating there too, using U.S. tech, Japanese advanced capabilities, and Australia's geographic advantages for launches to try and set norms for space and counter any ambitions for dominance there.
So, We've covered a lot the stakes. China's gray zone tactics aimed at morale, the immense physical barriers to invasion, Taiwan's multi layered defense and resilience efforts, and the international dimension. It leads to a final thought, maybe for you, the listener, to ponder. We've seen how much relies on psychology, on resilience, alongside the military and economic factors. In a potential Taiwan Strait crisis today, what does victory or failure actually mean? Is it purely a military outcome? Or has the information space, societal will, economic pressure, has that become the main battleground, making a kinetic invasion perhaps far less likely or less appealing than that slow, persistent squeeze we discussed? Something to think about. And that brings us to the end of our discussion today. Thank you for joining us for this exploration of the Taiwan Strait.
Yes, thank you for your time and for tuning in. We hope this is giving you a clearer picture of all the complex factors involved.
If you found this useful, please do like, share, and subscribe to the Global War Watch Network. We really want to hear your thoughts too, so please share them in the comment section below. And you can join us on social media. All the links for that are in the description. Thanks again for listening.